different on the evening of January 29th. Latrice had class, and Darren was at work. What wasn't ordinary was the next morning, January 30th, 2008. It wasn't ordinary at all, especially not for David Jones, who was on his morning commute on his way to a meeting. It was approximately 7:30. On a cold winter morning in Raleigh, David was driving down Interstate 540, and as traffic was slowing down, David passed time by looking out the window. He looked to the right, and something caught his eye, so he did a double take. He thought, "What is that?" The side of the road at this time of year wasn't green and full of life. It was brown from the snow melting. There was dry, golden brown brush lining both sides of the road. He saw something lying up an embankment, and it didn't blend into the foliage. It stood out. David couldn't just leave. He pulled off the shoulder a little bit so that he could take a closer look without his car moving along the road. He thought he knew what he was looking at, so he called 911. He said he was going westbound on I-540, just past the Buffalo Road exit, and he thought he saw a body on the side of the road. To picture what David was looking at, I want to describe what this highway is like and what the terrain looks like on both sides. This will help you envision what David was seeing. By this time, it was light outside. He was going westbound, just past that Buffalo exit. The ground next to the highway was a golden brown color. Short, dry, dead grass. There wasn't tall green grass or bushes. It was less dense, so anything on the ground would stand out. What David saw was something lying on the embankment, like I said, so it was on a bit of an incline, up toward more of a wooded area. After that call, he was 100% certain that he knew what he was looking at. There was no mistaking it for anything else. He won't ever forget that moment. And I don't think you will either when you find out exactly what he was looking at. The 911 dispatcher sent officers to the location, and sure enough, it didn't take more than a few glances for officers to know that they were dealing with a deceased human being. As they approached, they could ascertain that it was a black female in her 20s. She was on her back with both arms spread out above her head, and her legs were spread very far apart, probably as far as they could go. She was wearing blue jeans, a white long-sleeve top covered in blood. There was no mistaking what David saw. With the way the body was positioned, it would have almost been facing the road on a slant instead of being flat. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine how shocking it would be? I was able to find pictures of this crime scene, and I'm doing my very best to describe this because it has stuck with me. Can you imagine you're driving by, and when you look over, instead of something being completely flat on the ground, you're seeing a person with their arms outstretched and they're on an incline? So instead of being back, they're up a little bit. So it's almost as though they're just facing the road like that. And the stark contrast of her dark skin and the white shirt, the bright white shirt, and the blood on the blue jeans and the white shirt, it was haunting. Initially, the first responders that got there thought this was probably a pedestrian that was struck by a vehicle because it's common when people are walking on the side of the road. A driver's eyes can catch a glimpse of them and be drawn like the steering wheel can swerve and be drawn in that direction. It's an auto response. It's very dangerous to be on the shoulder of a busy highway, and it's absolutely terrible when this happens. But when they get closer, they realize that is not what happened here. This is not an accident at all. Someone did this to this poor girl. Officers get to work quickly to secure the scene. They don't want a passerby glancing over and seeing this horrific scene in front of them. They put up a tent around the body. They had a blue tarp over her. And then they put out something you can't miss at a crime scene: the yellow tape around the perimeter of the scene. Homicide detectives are called out, along with Jennifer Raymer, who was the assistant district attorney of Wake County at the time. And as Jennifer walked up, she could tell this was brutal. It was as though all the blood